I guess we'll check out the Soviet printer. The non-binary. Are you saying it's a trans computer? The forbidden Soviet computer that defied binary logic. Okay, let's check it out.
In 1958, at the height of the Cold War, a team of Soviet scientists built a computer that defied everything the world thought it knew about logic. It didn't rely on binary, but on balanced ternary. -1, 0, and +1. It was faster, more reliable, and more efficient than its competitors. And yet, despite its brilliance, it vanished into obscurity, covered under layers of political infighting, institutional abstraction, and a conspiracy that still hasn't been fully explained. Today, I want to tell you the story of the Satun project, the world's first ternary computer. I've spent countless hours researching this subject, and I hope this video does justice to one of the most fascinating experiments in the history of computing.
Okay,
In 1952,
you got my attention.
A young engineer named Nikolai Brasentov graduated from the radio engineering department on the Moscow Power Engineering Institute. He had no idea that he would soon build a computer that defied everything we thought we knew about logic itself. In 1954, a university friend showed him the prototype of the M2 computer. The M2 was scheduled for transfer to MSU, ordered by Sergei Lvovich Sobolev, an influential Soviet mathematician who had spent the previous decade working on the Soviet atomic program, and now headed the Department of Computational Mathematics. Sobolev even reserved a special place for it, room 1313, high in the towering Lomonosov building, one of Stalin's 7 sisters, and then the tallest building in Europe. Brasentov was captivated. Along with 2 engineers from his department, he transferred to the newly forming computing center to help prepare for the M2's arrival. But in 1955, that dream fell apart. The computer would not be transferred to the university due to a dispute between Sobolev and Isaac Semanovich Bruk, whose lab was in possession of the M2. At the elections to the Academy of Sciences, Sobolev didn't endorse Bruk's candidacy, which deeply offended him, and out of spite, he refused to hand over the M2. The team had prepared everything, but the computer never arrived. And this kind of misfortune would become a recurring theme in Brasentsov's career, as you will learn soon. Sobolev, ever the optimist, refused to give up. If we can't have the M2, he told his colleagues, we will build our own. He envisioned
relative to what you have in later years.
Institutions across the Soviet Union. Brasentsov was tasked with specifying the technical details of such a machine. He later wrote, "It was clear that the planned machine could not be based on vacuum tubes, but there were practically no semiconductor elements at that time, not to mention transistors or even diodes. The electromagnetic..."
What year was the transistor? '47 they were invented. First produced in the 50s. Well, unless you want to listen to Alien, guys. The Alien. If you want to go down a fun rabbit hole, look up Roswell, aliens, and transistors. There is a very deep rabbit hole you can go down on. There are people that are convinced that transistors are actually reverse engineered from alien spacecrafts. Just go have some fun with that one.
Ferrite core elements, popular at the time, represented a real alternative. These ferrite core elements, sometimes translated as ferrite diodes...
Ancient aliens? No, like 50s aliens. They're not that ancient. The idea is that it's not just transistors, there's also people convinced that fiber optics were also something that were back-engineered from crashed... for like a crash retrieval program, and most of it, most people try to tie it back to Roswell, which is like Roswell is the big alien conspiracy. If you don't know, I have a lot of fun digging down alien rabbit holes. It's very fun.
Were magnetic logic components that use the nonlinear properties of ferrite, a type of iron-based ceramic. While experimenting with them, Brasentsov made a remarkable discovery. With the right wiring, they could generate stable ternary pulses, signals with 3 distinct states instead of just 2. This opened the door to something radical, building a computer based not on binary but on ternary. That single observation would change the course of his life and nearly change the history of computing. Mathematically, ternary is closest to the most efficient number base possible, which is the base of the natural logarithm e, according to the argument of radix economy. In practice, it does come with some drawbacks, such as device complexity. This is something that Brassensov himself acknowledges in his notes on the Satun. More on that in a moment. Unlike binary, ternary can be further subdivided into 2 different types: the balanced ternary and the unbalanced ternary. In this video, we'll only focus on the balanced variant, since it is the one that is relevant to the Satun computer. To represent numbers in balanced ternary, we can use the signs plus, minus, and 0 instead of writing entire numbers.
Right.
This way, the number 7 can be represented as plus minus plus. If we break it down, we get 1 times 3 to the power of 0 minus 1 times 3 to the power of 1 plus 3 times 3 to the power of 2, which is equal to 1 minus 3 plus 9. To obtain a negative number representation, we simply flip all the signs. For example, if we take 13 and invert all the pluses to a minus, we get minus 13. The numbers in ternary are inherently signed, since the most significant trit, the ternary equivalent of a bit, always shows us the sign of the number. This kind of simplicity and intuitiveness when working with negative numbers is not really there in binary, since we have to distinguish between signed
binary you have to have a signed bit
and unsigned integers. Furthermore, rounding of numbers becomes trivially easy. Balanced ternary is symmetric, so we can always truncate the number to 0. Brassensov reported on his experiments with the ferrite cores and their ternary properties to his colleagues. On January 7, 1956, he presented his idea for a balanced ternary machine to the team. After a long discussion, it was decided. They would build 2 machines, a conventional binary one, and as an alternative, a ternary one. Over the next 2 years, the group held 39 seminars. Each time, the members would present reports on topics ranging from existing computer architectures and their shortcomings to proposals.
I actually wasn't even aware that there had ever been attempts to build a ternary computer. Like, I missed this part of my computer history.
For new designs. Brassensov, together with Evgeny Zhogolev, presented on the ternary prototype, which by then had earned the name Satun, after a small river that flows near the university. By September 1956, they had drawn the first sketch diagrams. A month later, they described the arithmetic of ternary numbers. When Brassensov and Zhogolev were presenting their reports on ternary, other teams still continued to pursue binary designs. But by the end of 1956, most of the group was convinced that ternary was the way to go. Brassensov wrote, "The advantage of ternary circuit design became increasingly obvious as 3-digit logic elements and ternary functional circuits were created. It turned out that the complexity, even if twice that of a bit, was more than compensated by the naturalness and harmony of the ternary architecture as a whole." After 1956, 3 more reports on the Satun computer were presented, detailing its technical specifications.
So far, I'm only hearing good things. I don't know why. I'm not sure why we don't build ternary computers now. Australia has crazy wildlife, that we do. Koalas have chlamydia.
As I already mentioned, Satun would use balanced ternary and fully support 3-valued logic as described by a Polish mathematician Jan Łukasiewicz, which I also covered in detail in the previous video. But if you haven't watched it, here is a brief summary. Łukasiewicz logic uses the values false, unknown, and true, which map nicely to the balanced ternary values.
So you... Wait, so you don't... If I'm understanding this correctly, you wouldn't necessarily need to... Okay. Huh.
-1, 0, and 1. Just as in binary logic, the 3 main operations are negation, conjunction, and disjunction. Using just these 3 operations, we can define circuits that perform arithmetic operations, such as addition and subtraction. Now, let's take a step back from the math and look at how Satun actually worked. Satun's architecture included 6 functional units: the arithmetic logic unit, ALU for short, control unit, operational memory, input device, output device, and a magnetic drum memory. This last unit, the magnetic drum memory, might be a bit controversial, and I will get to why later in the video. The input unit was a 5-position punched paper tape reader operating at 800 characters per second. The data would be transported in serial form to the RAM, more specifically to the 9-bit shift register Z, where it would be converted from serial to parallel for saving to memory. The RAM was subdivided into 2 stages. A fast random access memory device on ferrite cores with a capacity of 162 9-bit memory words, and a slower memory device on a magnetic drum with a capacity of 1944 words. The ferrite...
To be fair, Australia had strange UFO sightings that the US tried to stop them reporting. Australia had a lot of cool alien stuff over the years. You sure it isn't some undiscovered wildlife? The most recent is the weird glowing orbs keep appearing over Queensland that no one can explain. We have another alien enjoyer in chat.
Core RAM essentially functioned as a cache, meaning high-speed memory which stores data so that future requests for that data can be served faster. The ALU could perform addition, subtraction, multiplication, tritwise multiplication, shifting...
What is tritwise multiplication? Tritwise multiplication. I am not sure.
Normalization, and it supported floating point calculations. Satun's instruction set had 24 commands, 21 of which were used. It supported unconditional and conditional jump instructions. But the beauty of Satun wasn't just in its engineering. It proved that a computer built not on binary could actually work. When it comes to performance, Satun could add and subtract in 180 microseconds and multiply in 320 microseconds.
Wow!
But back in the day, reliability was the more important factor, and Satun excelled in that domain. I will talk more about this soon. But first, about that controversial magnetic drum that I mentioned earlier.
Okay,
Brian
right.
Hayes talks about Satun in his paper The Third Base, and he mentions an interesting thing. He claims that Satun used 2 magnetic tapes wired in a tandem, and that in reality the ternary states were stored on the magnetic drum as a mapping of 2 binary bits. Therefore, it didn't fully utilize the potential of ternary. But then again, the magnetic drum was only a part of the memory unit, the other one being the fast ferrite core storage, which, as far as I know, worked on the basis of ternary states.
Right.
Plus, perhaps surprisingly, in 2021, Reichenbach and colleagues reported that this seemingly inefficient implementation of 2 bits for 1 trit shows 2.3 times speed up with arithmetic operations. By December 1958, Satun was operational. Programmers quickly began writing code and solving practical problems. Brasintsev recalls that despite its uncommon base-free logic, it was mastered easily and proved effective across a wide range of tasks. But this success story was short-lived. The Satun story would soon collide with politics, bureaucracy, and resistance from within the Soviet computer industry itself. Brasintsev became
Nothing ever changes. Lobbyists never change. It doesn't matter what year it is, everything remains the same.
a chief designer of the Satun project, and just as the first programs were running, he traveled to Kiev for a conference on new developments in computational mathematics. There, he met with Viktor Glushkov, who is now known as the founding father of Soviet information technology. When Glushkov heard about the Ternary machine, he was fascinated. He handed Brasintsev a sheet of paper and ordered him to prepare a report overnight. The very next day, Satun was presented to the conference audience. In 1959, the machine was showcased at the Grand USSR exhibition of
Glushkov is another tragedy because he had the idea for internet with a detailed plan long before US and ARPANET, but Soviets were too busy spending on space race, so he yelled straight to the head of USSR, Khrushchev. He was relieved of his medals and post shortly there. Oh, okay. So we could have had a world where the USSR was the origin of the internet. That would... And, like, what? How many? When did ARPANET come along? What year was that? Because how early would that predate this or predate ARPANET?
Economic achievements. Apparently, it was even visited by Nikita Khrushchev, the first secretary of the Communist Party. But despite this, Satun did not attract significant attention, and it was only the beginning of its struggles. That same year, during a meeting of the State Committee for Radio Electronics, the future of Soviet computing was being mapped out. When the matter of Satun came up, the committee blacklisted it from serial production. The official reasoning was that it would be a waste of committee funds. Brasensov later wrote that this was absurd because the committee had never allocated any funds to Satun in the first place. Sobolev, furious with this decision, confronted the officials, asking them, "Have you even seen this machine?" The officials replied, "We don't have to see it or know anything about it. All we need is a piece of paper with the right stamps and signatures." After the hearing, Sobolev went straight to the Communist Party headquarters and managed to arrange a visit to Satun by staff members of the Ministry of Defense. After seeing the computer in action, the ministry insisted on a formal evaluation by an interdepartmental commission. On April 7, 1960, the commission began testing Satun at the Moscow State University Computing Center. The rigorous tests lasted 3 weeks and the machine worked flawlessly the entire time. In a resolution of the Interdepartmental Commission from April 29, 1960, it was stated that the machine met all specifications and Satun was recognized as the first working model of a ternary universal computing machine. For a brief moment, it seemed the project had won. The machine passed every test.
Clearly something went wrong
exactly
after this,
as promised. Well, but in Soviet Union, working wasn't always enough. The State Committee for Radio Electronics continued to oppose Satun, dismissing it as an ugly duckling of sorts. Meanwhile, abroad, there was genuine interest in the production of Satun. The Czechoslovak government offered to manufacture Satun on a large scale at the Jan Świerma plant in Brno. They prepared their best equipment.
So this really could have been a whole different direction for the computing industry. This could have been a world where, if not, like, mainstream computing, like, some aspect of the computing world would have been ternary. Like, that is actually a thing that could have happened.
Capable of producing hundreds of machines a year. But Soviet officials blocked this as well, arguing that production should remain domestic, even though they had no intention of producing it themselves. Despite these roadblocks, the team pressed forward and managed to secure a very limited production domestically. This too was not without problems, as manufacturers often didn't follow the technical specifications, sometimes changing the layout of the computer in order to allow for easier assembly. Brasensov writes in more detail of one such case. The fan sucking air from the magnetic drum chamber was moved in the interest of ease of fastening, so that outwardly it seemed that everything was working and even looked more harmoniously. But in fact, the air was pumped along the floor, while in the upper layers, the temperature exceeded the maximal permitted level by more than 2 times. In total, between 1959 and 1965, only around 50 Satun machines were produced. They were installed across the Soviet Union, from the Zhukovsky Air Force Academy, where they powered automated systems for testing aircraft engines, to the hydrometeorological centers, where they generated short-term weather forecasts. Universities used them for chemistry and mathematics programs. And Brasensov proudly noted that even without service or spare parts, Satun functioned reliably in climates ranging from the deserts of Ashgabat to the cold winters of Yakutsk. But in 1965, without warning, production was halted. The team only learned of it when clients called to complain about cancelled orders. Brasensov later wrote bitterly, "It is impossible to explain such an outcome by either scientific, technical, economic, or business reasons." Despite the endless setbacks and bureaucratic resistance, Brasensov never considered Satun a failure. On the contrary, he believed the project had demonstrated in practice the potential and correctness of ternary architecture, and he hadn't given up on the project yet. In June 1967, the head of the Moscow State University Computing Center approved Brasenstov's new research proposal. The plan was ambitious: to design and complete a new ternary computer in less than 3 years. The target date, 1970, gave the machine its name, Satun 70. The new model was a refined version of the original. It had more RAM, user-programmable read-only memory pages, and a larger magnetic drum.
Wow.
It consumed less power and replaced the bulky vacuum tube power supply with a transistor-based one. It was also physically smaller. Satun 70 was built around a stack-based architecture. Satun 70 was indeed completed by April 1970. But as often in this story, the success was followed immediately by misfortune. Zhogolev was tasked with writing the software for Satun 70, but it was never delivered. Brassensov writes, Satun 70 worked in tests that I had to write myself because Zhogolev had done literally nothing. He was distracted by another job in collaboration.
Wait. Even in the Soviet Union, even in the Soviet Union, you have a group project and someone slacks off.
With the Unified Laboratories for Nuclear Research in Dubna. At the same time, the leadership at Moscow State University changed. Sergei Lvovich Sobolev, who initiated the Satun project, had left the university and moved from Moscow to Novosibirsk. The new head of the computing center was far less interested in experimental research. He ordered Brassensov's lab to leave its facilities. The team and their equipment were relocated to a windowless attic in a student dormitory. They managed to take Satun 70 with them, but the original Satun, which was still in use by the faculty, was destroyed by the university. I've reached out to the Faculty of Computational Mathematics and Cybernetics at MSU, asking if any official reasons for this were given. I've got a reply from Ms. Vladimirova, a former student of Brassensov and now a researcher at the department.
Okay.
Here is what she wrote. The original prototype, which was installed at the computer laboratory, was switched off and dismantled in the summer of 1973. There is a logbook for this machine. It contains records of the machine being used without any downtime until the very last day.
Okay.
However, the document stating that the prototype was to be dismantled has not been preserved. The working conditions in the new lab, if you can even call it that, were suboptimal to say the least. Brassensov later wrote that there was hardly any air to breathe. Yet the team carried on. They developed a system called Nastavnik, or tutor, for the Satun 70. It was used for didactical purposes, such as placing students into language classes according to their level. Nastavnik remained in use for over 30 years at the Faculty of Computational Mathematics and Cybernetics. But outside the university, Satun 70 never saw significant adoption. On this matter, Brassensov wrote, Of course I was bitter that no one understood us, but then I realized that this was the normal state of affairs in human society and that I had actually gotten off lightly. William of Ockham, who advocated for ternary logic in the 14th century, barely evaded being burned at the stake and spent most of his life in exile.
Wait, what? Hold up. This is like this is like a 500-year hatred?
Another example is Lewis Carroll, who was only able to smuggle his excellent discoveries in logic under the guise of a children's playbook. To this day, logicians don't like to talk about these discoveries and pretend that they are simply non-existent. The development of this impressive machine is often
Have you watched Orb? I have watched Orb, yes.
By the many loose ends and unexplainable decisions. On paper, it was everything the Soviet Union claimed to want. An expensive, efficient, reliable machine accessible for universities and research labs. But in practice, it was constantly blacklisted and quietly pushed into obscurity. And that's what strikes me the most about this story. If Satun really was as effective as reports suggest, why wasn't it embraced? Why did officials go as far as to forbid its production, block publications, and even destroy the original machine? It seems almost absurd. I've reached out to several departments and institutions in Moscow connected to the project, and while some researchers responded, none could explain why Satun was suppressed. Even those closest to the story seem unsure what really happened. Brassensov continued to work on base-free computing for decades. He even tried developing new ternary processors using modern technologies. However, he was unable to secure sufficient funding and assemble a team of developers. He guided the Laboratory of Ternary Computer Science right up until his death in December 2014. He left a legacy as the creator of the world's first ternary computer.
What? We missed out on some serious gaming power. Okay. Right. That was a really good video. I am just left with more questions than... Oh, no, we're not gonna watch the computer file video. I am just left with more questions than answers at this point. I don't understand what the fuck happened here. Oh, okay, let's have a look at this.
For instance, my CashOS looks like Windows goddamn Vista. Because I love me Windows Vista, ladies and gentlemen. I got that whole start option. I got everything right over here. My user interface looks pretty damn close. And that's all because you can theme Linux to your heart's content, okay?
Lovely.
Some people make it look really fancy. Some people just love the Windows aesthetic like me. For instance, my CashOS looks like Windows goddamn Vista. Because I love me.
Sure. Sure, Aerotheme Plasma, why not? Gotta love that. Oh, that's great. That's awesome. No, that video was really good though. Like that's obviously not the end. Where's the preview? Okay. That one, thank you. This video is really good. Like, I'd never watched this guy's stuff before. Definitely check it out. Yeah. We might have to watch some of his other stuff at some point, again.